February in the garden, my friends, and that means that we're coming at you live, hot and fresh, here from the Epic Homestead with our top picks for what to plant in February, no matter where you live. So myself, Jacques, Megan, North Carolina, and Shannie in Florida are gonna hit you with some stuff that you can start either indoors or outdoors, no matter where you live. So cultivate that like button, and I might just ship you one of my onions. And let's get into the video. You know, when you see a juicy purple cauliflower head this thick, you know you've done something right in the garden. And this is something that you could plant in February, but it's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a crop that I forgot to grow pretty much all of last year. I squeaked in the crop right in the fall. This year I'm rectifying that, and I hope you can forgive me because I'm talking about peas. Peas are a crop that I think it's easy to forget. I don't know why, but both Jacques and I on the team, we sort of forgot to plant them a lot last year. And I'm into the shelling peas this season. Of course, you've got your snap peas, eat them fresh, snow peas, kind of the same thing. But the shelling peas, I want to give it a shot this season. And there's 3 varieties I like and one that I love. First off, we have Progress number 9. It's a classic. It's a heavy producer. It's a solid one. Give it a shot. If you want something a little bit smaller, it's more of a baby pea. Iona is really nice. Green Arrow if you just kind of want like an all-around performer. But the one I'm going to give a big shot to this season is the Wando pea. Why? It's heat tolerant more so than most peas are. But more importantly, for those of you in colder climates, it's actually quite cold tolerant. You would want to start this 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost, which means it's fantastic for people in cold climates because you can actually direct sow it almost in a winter sowing style technique and let it then just sprout up. And if you want a transplanting technique, I know a lot of people don't like to transplant peas, but it's actually effective. You can do it really well. You just don't want to disturb the roots as you transplant. You can plant it in like a rain gutter or a trench or some sort of or a long elongated planter of some kind and just kind of slide that into the soil after they germinate, and it works really well.
If you've ever been to Mexico and you've had a refreshing agua de Jamaica drink, or you've been to Jamaica and had the warm, comforting sorrel drink, this is what you are drinking. This is what makes those drinks have that delicious, tart, cranberry-like flavor. This goes by many names. I like to call it Roselle. It's also called hibiscus, sorrel, and even the Florida cranberry. This type of flower is a type of hibiscus and it's related to okra. It actually grows pretty similarly to okra and looks really similar to okra. But this is a tropical flower and it requires a really long growing season in order for you to get a decent harvest from it. Again, I learned this the hard way because I did not plant it at the right time. I planted it out after our last frost along with our okra, not realizing that it needed a lot more time to mature than okra. And it finally started blooming literally like the week before our first frost. And unfortunately, the plant died before I could really get a true harvest from it. So again, learn from my mistakes here. This year, I am going to be starting it indoors with my tomatoes, with my peppers, about 8 weeks before our last frost so that it can get the head start that it needs to hopefully get a decent harvest. As you'll notice, this isn't your typical crop. It's not a vegetable, it's not a fruit. It's a flower, more specifically the calyx of a flower, kind of the outer surrounding part of the flower. And what happens is the flower will bloom and then this calyx will start to swell as the seed is forming inside. And after it blooms, these calyxes take 6 to 8 weeks to fully swell up and fully mature and fully be ready to harvest. One thing to keep in mind if you want to try growing Roselle this year is that it grows a lot larger than you would expect. So you want to give it plenty of room. I'm talking like 4 or 5 feet. This year's finally going to be the year that I truly get a bumper crop of Roselle, and I hope you guys do too. And we will be drinking all of the amazing drinks that it has to offer.
This pick is a PSA for all gardeners out there, regardless of where you live, especially in the United States, whether it's the northern states, the intermediate states, or the southern states where I am here in San Diego, California. And as a reminder to start your onions. Now, if you're a southern grower like I am, it's funny to say southern, but I'm talking southern latitude of the United States, then your fall onions should have already been planted in the winter time. These are short day onions. If you don't know, onions are broken down to short day, intermediate, and long day. Southern states really only grow short day onions. The middle states can get away with intermediate, and then the very northern states are the long day onions. So if you're in the northern latitude, you have 2 wonderful onions to choose from, the yellow sweet Spanish Utah and the Walla Walla, a classic sweet yellow onion. For the intermediate states, I chose 2 red onions for you guys, the Flat of Italy and the Red Amposta. The cool thing is that here in San Diego or any southern state, you could actually try to get away with intermediate onions. I started right now in the winter and planted in the spring for a summer harvest, and this year I'm actually going to be starting my very own shallots. Regardless of where you live, you should be able to grow shallots. You want to start the seeds now, transplant them in the spring, and enjoy your shallot harvest in the summertime.
It's February in Central Florida, and today it might be cold, but it doesn't matter because it's tomato time. Yes, this is the optimal time to start spring tomatoes in our area. It feels crazy to say something like that. The month of February can get down into the 30s, even in Central Florida where I am. Tomatoes, as a rule, do not like to set and hold good quality fruit when the nighttime temperatures get into the mid 80s or higher. And in my region in Florida, that's gonna start happening by March, April. One way to sort of skirt around the tomato issue in Florida is to grow cherry tomatoes. These are going to be less susceptible to the extreme heat and high pest and disease pressure that late spring is going to throw at them. So typically you're going to get cherry tomato harvests later into the spring than say a beefsteak or a larger tomato. Chadwick cherries are a great choice. They're a classic red, highly snackable, perfect balanced flavor between tart and sweet. And like I said, a cherry is just a better choice for the deep south where we're going to be battling major humidity and disease. I've been lucky enough to partake in a few different heirloom tomato tastings and variety trials, and I have consistently come up with a personal favorite out of the hundreds of varieties that I've tried, and that's the carbon tomato. This one is insane. It's incredible. The flavor is smoky, a little bit umami, sweet, and tangy. This is kind of an improvement on the Cherokee purple tomato, very similar if you've grown that one, but carbon is just a bit better. Another key to success in growing tomatoes in the Southeast in a region with super high pest and disease pressure is to thin the plants of their excess foliage. I'm talking about pulling suckers, any raggy lower leaves, and trellising them in a tidy manner to really get airflow optimized. You see, I've got a Florida weave going on these plants right here. Take away that extra foliage and you're going to lower the humidity, you're going to prevent some more of those fungal diseases, and you're even going to eliminate some of the areas where your pests could be hiding.
I have just totally and completely dropped the ball on planting these beautiful flowers for the past 2 years now. Rookie mistake, I just wasn't planting them at the right time, but this year's gonna be my year. I finally plant sweet peas. I've heard that these are so beautiful in any garden, and I've heard that they smell amazing. This variety is actually called Perfume Delight, so I can't wait to smell what they smell like. I'm just imagining it now. Now is the time to get these in the ground when the garden kind of looks like this and everything's dead, about 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost. You want to go ahead and you can direct sow them right in the ground, or you can start them indoors in seed trays. And in milder climates, you can even plant these in the fall and then they will pop up in the spring. When we hear the word pea, we often think of edible peas like our snap peas, our English peas, and our snow peas. These are not edible. They're actually very toxic. So I would plant them far away from your edible peas just so that there's no mix-up. I'm gonna be opting to start these in seed trays just because I want a little more control over their germination, and I really can't miss out on these 3 years in a row. So hopefully by the time it is time to plant them outside, they'll be established plants and I can go ahead and get a head start on their bloom cycle so they start blooming right as spring hits.
I'm crouched down here next to my beautiful calendula. As a reminder to you guys that flowers are worth it in the garden. Not only do they look stunning, they attract all sorts of beneficial insects, and in this case, the calendula can even be used to make a salve. But I'm not here to talk about calendula, I'm here to talk about a few different flowers, hollyhocks and poppies. I've chosen 2 different varieties for you. These are actually 2 slightly challenging flowers that today I'm going to help demystify and get you across the finish line to growing these in your garden. The reason why I chose 2 difficult flowers for you guys to grow is because these are beautiful flowers that a lot of people don't have the chance to succeed with in the garden. The 2 hollyhocks I chose for you guys are Indian Spring and Charter's Double Blend. Now this one's nice because it will generally flower in the first year, and hollyhocks are perennials. So what makes these flowers harder than others? Well, let me show you the seed to begin with. I have my seed in one hand here and then my sandpaper here. All I'm going to do is take this and literally scratch that sandpaper. Getting any amount of scarification on there, any scratches, will weaken the seed coat just like that, and it will improve the chances of germination. So I just scratch and plant, scratch and plant. And the other thing about hollyhocks is that you don't want to bury them deeply. They are a surface sown seed because they need light to germinate. I'll show you another trick for that because poppies are in that same wheelhouse. Now the two poppies I chose for you guys today are Mother of Pearl and Pandora. Both of them are really beautiful classic poppies. And the tricky thing with these guys is that they also need light to germinate and they also hate being transplanted. So what do? I get a nice seed cell, fully moist, flattened out, take my seed packet just like so. I'll tap the back of my hand until I get a couple nice little seeds just like that to fall on the surface. Now, the special thing I do instead of burying with soil, I'll grab a handful of vermiculite. This is basically a sponge that lets light through. So this will soak up the water, keep the seeds wet, but still let light through to allow that germination to happen. You can use that on the hollyhocks and the poppies.
Winters in Florida are bizarre. Sometimes we get absolutely no frost. Sometimes we get down into the low 30s and even the high 20s. This year we flirted with disaster. We got some cold temperatures, but it was not cold enough to kill off my fall planted peppers. So I am enjoying some gorgeous cayenne peppers here. They're coming in hot. We're getting some nice ones for our cooking. But for the month of February, I'm gonna make sure to start my sweet peppers. Like tomatoes, I'm going to start my sweet peppers indoors. I'm going to keep them protected in trays so that we pass any potential cool weather. Then I'm going to transplant them out when they're about 8 to 10 weeks old. Now, peppers can fare in the heat fairly well, but the excess heat of a Florida spring is even too much for peppers, which is almost hard to believe, but it's definitely true. Sweet peppers are especially sensitive to high nighttime temperatures like we get in late spring, early summer in Florida. So I'm particular about getting my sweet peppers planted in early February. Now, I highly recommend that you select a variety that has smaller fruit or earlier maturity date. This is going to ensure that you squeeze in a full harvest season before the temperatures skyrocket and the plants start to decline. I'm loving the mini red bell peppers because I have a higher chance of getting a good quality harvest before things really start to turn nasty. If you are like me and you love to make homemade hot sauce, I have a variety that you have to try. It's called the lemon drop pepper. It is a bacatum pepper. I believe it's called ají limón, where it's from in Peru. It's absolutely delicious, citrusy, hot. It's about as hot as your average cayenne pepper. It can't be beat for a lacto-fermented homemade hot sauce, and the color is striking. It's sunny, vibrant yellow. In the case of bell peppers, to improve the size of each individual pepper, I do thin the fruits, making sure that I don't have more than 10 fruits on one plant at any one time, just to make sure that I get a little more bang for my buck and bigger fruit at the end of the day.
This next crop has famously been dubbed the poor man's vegetable or the poor man's potato, and was commonly associated with poverty back in the day. The mighty turnip got this reputation because, one, it's super inexpensive, it's super easy to grow, and it's surprisingly really filling. And it's a 2-for-1 crop. You can eat the root and you can eat the leaves. So in times of war and famine, when food was scarce, people turned to turnips, and it was actually a staple food for a lot of people when the more expensive and luxurious vegetables weren't so available. Don't worry, I think you're luxurious. Turnips, in my opinion, are hugely slept on. They're so much easier to grow than potatoes, and they taste just like potatoes. If you chop this up, drizzle it with olive oil, roast it, tastes just like a potato. You mash them, taste like a potato. You can turn them into chips. You can do anything with the turnip root that you can do with potatoes, and it's gonna taste really similar. So I say it's a new era. Potatoes, move over. It's the turnips' time to shine. There are so many different varieties of turnips you can choose from. Personally, I love the purple top variety. I just think that they are gorgeous. And my favorite way to plant turnips is to do a little bit of chaos gardening and just scatter the seeds on some nutrient-dense soil. Maybe run your fingers through it to get some seed to soil contact. And that's it. Just leave them alone until they start popping up. It's really that easy. And when they do start popping up, you might want to thin them out a bit, maybe give them about 4 to 5 inches apart because they can get pretty big. I like to harvest them when they are no bigger than this because if they get any bigger than this, they can just start to get a little tough and gnarly, and you don't want that. Now is the perfect time to start turnips in zone 8A because they do love cooler growing conditions, and if you start them now, you'll be eating these long before your luxurious potatoes are ready.
My next crop is one that you could feed an army with, or you could feed me for one day. I love it that much. In fact, I love it so much that 5-6 years ago, I tried to live off of this crop, and I lost 13 pounds of muscle. Didn't work out that well for me. I'm still dealing with the trauma of that to this day, but nevertheless, I still love to grow this plant, and I'm talking, of course, about the wonderful potato. Potatoes are a crop known sort of as a pioneer crop. They grow from seed potatoes, so basically potatoes, instead of seeds, although there is one variety you can grow from seed called the Clancy potato, which is a really fun grow. We have it growing over there. But the thing about potatoes that you have to know, variety selection is so important. This is a variety called Sorpo Mira right here. In my climate, this does pretty well. There's also one called Red Norland that does pretty well over here. But then you can't go wrong with a Yukon Gold, a Warba, a Russet. I would say experiment with the ones that you might find at your local nursery. Maybe pick up some botanical seeds while you're there. The thing to know about planting potatoes is you want to wait until they sprout or chit. You don't have to, but it's a little bit more reliable that way. You can cut a potato in half if you want, as long as there's 2 to 3 eyes on the potato. Dig a hole, plant them about 4 to 6 inches deep. Experiment with ways to grow. You can grow them in buckets, you can grow them in the ground, you can grow them deeper, you can grow them under cover like we have here, you can grow them in straw. In fact, last year we did a video growing potatoes 7 different ways. We found some interesting results, but we didn't grow them as best as we could have hoped. So we're doing them 8 different ways with a little bit more rigorous testing this season. Subscribe if you want to see the results to that. Nevertheless, one of the easier and more satisfying crops to grow. I know it seems weird because they're so cheap at the grocery store, but trust me, you will not eat better than your own homegrown potatoes, not only for satisfaction, but the flavor truly is better. So give them a shot this season. And if you want even more guides on potato growing specifically, including mistakes you might make, check out this playlist right here. Shop our seeds at botanicalinterest.com and have a good season, guys. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.